You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
Welcome back to Real Talk Texas. Today, we're talking about debt elimination and restructuring. So this month of November, we're going to talk a lot about what you can do to protect your assets. We talked about that last week with Lori Ashmore-Peters. And this week, we're talking about how to restructure and make sure that you're ready going forward if you need to do that. And we've got a real expert in our studio today. We've got Gerrit Pronsky of Pronsky & Patel. They're located in uptown Dallas. We just got done discussing the business aspect, and we were talking off the air about how a lot of business owners that have LLCs set up, they still personally guarantee a lot of things, so that drags in the personal side. So I'd like to talk a little bit in this segment here about personal. What are the types of restructures that can happen to protect your personal assets when you're not making ends meet? Maybe your revenue's starting to drop, whether it's your personal income, maybe you took a pay cut at work, and now you've still got the same debt, so you're out there just treading water, and you keep going under every once in a while, and you don't really see a way that that's going to improve in the next 3 to 4 months, and you just don't see a way to make it. Is there a way to do this the right way, Gerrit, as far as how do you get prepared so that you have the best outcome when you go through this?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's really a very important part of this process is the preparation. I can say sort of unfortunately in my business, we have to take people as they come, and sometimes they're in a situation where they have to file bankruptcy in a matter of days or even hours because there's a foreclosure that's about to happen or something like that. But the more time that there can be preparation, it's like, I guess, anything in life, you're better off if you're well prepared. And in bankruptcy, for example, just to give you a few examples of ways that you try to get prepared, is cash is very important in the bankruptcy process. If you're going to go through a Chapter 11, you want to try to have as much cash as possible. So
why is that?
It's just kind of the old cash is king kind of concept, to basically have cash. If vendors put you on COD, for example, you need cash for that. You are going to need cash for various professionals that you need in the process, appraisers, attorneys, accountants, things like that that require some cash. And just basically, if you have cash to operate, you're just in a more solid position. You're not going to hit the wall and run out of operating capital. A lot of times in bankruptcy proceedings, it's difficult to get credit and to get lenders to loan money. So that's one place where I think some preparation is important.
Well, I mean, once you start to file bankruptcy, doesn't the credit availability just that faucet shut off completely for a while? Or?
It doesn't, and we find that a lot of times vendors will work with you. Vendors are more and more sophisticated about the process, and they generally understand that giving credit to entities that have filed Chapter 11 is a lot of times very good credit risk. These are companies that are in a court-protected environment. They've put all their pre-bankruptcy debt on the shelf, and they're operating profitably from an operations standpoint, and they can be pretty good credit risk. So, yeah, we see vendors go put people on COD, but that's not necessarily the case. And with respect to credit lines and banks, there are quite a few lenders out there that are willing to loan to bankrupt debtors. They're called DIP, or debtor in possession loans.
Right.
And they're quite safe and secure because, again, they're within the protection of the federal bankruptcy system.
So that really covers it as far as from a business standpoint. And if we go now so I guess if you own a business, you've got to have your supply chain and things like that so you can keep your cash flow going. There are options, and we can have our clients or our listeners out there that call in can reach out to you and get advice there. Now I want to jump the fence to the personal side. I'm just, I was working at at a job, and I talk to a lot of executives, quite frankly, in the mortgage business when we go. And one of the things we look at when we're doing a home loan is we'll look at their income for the last 2 years, and we'll look at their year to date. I can't tell you how many executives I've seen that have taken a pay cut over the last 3 years. I mean, people were making 200. I hear worry about taxing people over $250,000. I see a lot of people that were making 250 before the last 3 years, and now they're out there and they're making 150,000, or they've taken a big pay cut. And so I can imagine, and I see that when they're calling me for refinance, I have to explain that to show that it's not going to continue to drop further, so that it's a good loan for us. But there has to be a lot of people out there that they're not making the money they did before, but the debts didn't change. The car payment stayed the same. They may have actually been living on some credit card debt because they weren't bringing in as much income as they were before. So in that standpoint, what are the options? What are the strategies, and how do these people get ready? If you talk to them and you say, hey, yeah, I think you're going to need to do a restructure or a Chapter 7 which is a debt elimination, or a Chapter 13, which is a restructure and repayment, is there a strategy to make it so it's better on the other side of the fence once it's discharged, or once you're into the Chapter 13 repayment? How do they get better beyond, I heard you say, retain your cash, keep that in. It's Christmas season. I got to say, I bet there are people that are getting ready, and they know they're going to go and make a change. Is there something they got to be cautious about running up their credit cards during this season? Is that looked on unfavorably by the bankruptcy court if they say you had all your credit cards paid off and we're going to have a heck of a Christmas this year, and we go out and we charge up all of these credit cards? What can happen to you?
Yeah, there are a lot of rules that come into play, and I think when I'm hearing you ask the question, I'm thinking one of the primary things that we have to do with an individual is figure out what if they're going to go into a bankruptcy proceeding, what chapter is appropriate for them. And it really depends on a lot of different factors. Some of the main ones would be, we're looking at what their goals are with respect to debt elimination or debt restructure. And for example, the most attractive might be a Chapter 7, where it's called a liquidation, but it's basically just the bankruptcy court gets all of your assets that are not exempt under these exemption laws, which, as I said, are pretty liberal in Texas, and distributes those to creditors. And a lot of times there's nothing there, and then that individual will get a discharge in the bankruptcy, discharge of the debts.
So all the credit cards are gone away and things like that. And one of the things as a lender I'll mention that I hear a lot of ads about these debt elimination, or if you've got over X amount in credit card debt, don't go bankrupt, do this. As far as a lender's concerned, if you've gone into some kind of a consumer counseling type of thing, we look at that exactly the same as a bankruptcy. So it doesn't matter if it's an organization that's doing it out of the courts or not. Basically, you didn't pay your bills as agreed, so we're going to look at that, and we're going to start the clock on from that date forward. So if you're listening out there, that's one tip. Just be sure you know what you're doing when you're getting connected with somebody. Make sure you're contacting someone of real expertise. And in the studio today, you're listening to Real Talk Texas, and we've got Gerrit Pronsky of Pronsky and Patel, and he's here to talk about personal right now, and we've already talked about business, restructuring or bankruptcy. So a Chapter 7 is one where basically you get to keep your car and your house, and everything kind of goes away if that's what works out. And before October of 2005, was it, before the restructure? What's the different today? Why is it more difficult to get that? That sounds like the way to go to me, because as a lender, I will also say that we start the clock on a Chapter 7 from that day. On a Chapter 13, we want to wait and see how they've handled the restructuring of the debt. So for me as a lender, when I talk to people, if you can get a 7, I would go 7. It's still bankruptcy. Either way, we're going to treat it like a bankruptcy. Right.
If you're an individual and you can file a 7, as you say, a lot of times that's an optimal situation. before getting into the change of law, a couple of circumstances where you might not be able to file a 7 would be, for example, if your house is behind and you have to file a bankruptcy to stop a foreclosure on your house. A 7 is not going to do you much good in that situation. You're going to have to be able to cure the arrearage that you have on your house debt, and that's going to require restructure under your either Chapter 11 or Chapter 13. Also, tax debts a lot of times are not dischargeable in a bankruptcy, so a Chapter 7 isn't going to give you relief from those either. But let's say,
what about student loans, things like that?
And student loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. There's a lot of debts that are not dischargeable in bankruptcy, and they're generally debts that are incurred by fraud or some kind of intentional act. As you say, student loans.
Something that's government-backed.
Right, and alimony support, maintenance, that kind of thing. A lot of debts are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. But if you are able to get a discharge in bankruptcy, the way that the law that you're mentioning in 2005 changed things essentially was to make it much more difficult for consumer debtors to file Chapter 7 and just eliminate their debt. And that was the result of the credit card lobbies that were able to convince Congress to change the laws. So, and that's, again, just consumer debt. If you have business debt or if you've guaranteed business debt, those laws generally don't apply to you. But if you're a consumer debtor, then it's much more difficult now to file Chapter 7.
Well, Gerrit, we got to go to a break. We got a lot to talk about. I'm sure our listeners are very curious out there. So stay tuned to Real Talk Texas. We'll have more of how to take care of debt elimination or restructuring here today. Stay tuned.